Hello and welcome to another episode of the Hero's Journey Project. Here to update you on the comics that I've been reading from 1942 to 1943. I've read a couple issues of Sensation Comics. In those issues, I read the stories for Wonder Woman, Mr. Terrific, who's Terry Sloan, the original Mr. Terrific, and for Wildcat. So I was reading um, issue number 16, which has the first appearance of Hard Candy, which is Etta Candy's father. I don't know if he's not really a recurring character, I don't believe, but we get to meet Hard Candy, who's Etta Candy's father. Etta Candy is Wonder Woman's best friend at the time. And here I'll show you a couple of images from that issue from 16, Sensation Comics 16. Let's see here. Perfect. So here you can see the bad guys were up on a high plateau, and Wonder Woman didn't have a way to get up there, so they strapped her to a kite. So she is in that first panel, strapping her to a kite, hoping that the wind will carry her up to the top of that plateau. And so she's get carried up to the plateau and then dropped off. So it's great. Uh, and then a few panels, so she gets into an altercation with the bad guys, and a few panels later, they're sending the bad guys back down off that plateau using the using the string from the kite. So they're sending them all back down. That's great. So that's Sensation Comics 16. I love the creativity of some of these uh, comic books. It's fantastic. Here's an. I'm going to show you an ad from that era. It shows up in a lot of issues. It's for a bike break, but essentially this is kind of the world they were in, right? Like I said, like I've said previously, it's during World War II. The Americans, U.S. are definitely involved in the war at this time, and they had some little quiz here where you could insert the names of different, like the P-47, M4, PBY. You could put those in by the different machines, so you could readily identify which war machines were from the U.S. And I believe this had a lot to do with sort of making sure Americans were aware that, I mean, obviously they're aware the war was going on, but aware of, if you see airplane flying by, is it the P-47, the American plane, or is it an enemy plane? So it kind of gave you a little reassurance if you see some war machines in your neighborhood in the water flying around, if they're friendly or not. And this is a time where most of the cities had air raid sirens. They had air raid wardens that would make sure that people were taking shelter during these drills or during if an air raid were to come off, if there was an attack by air. So this was definitely a different time in the world for the U.S. Involved in that war. But while this is kind of a fun sort of thing to look at, it really does highlight what was going on in the world and the reality that the U.S. was facing at the time. So I also was reading an issue of Sensation Comics 17. I don't know there really any highlights from that one. I read Smash Comics issue number 37 to 40. Now in those issues, I was only reading the story about the Ray, who's Langford Terrell. He's the original the Ray. And he had a sidekick named Bud. It was just a kid. I mean, a kid must have been looks like he's about 10 years old. And he takes his kid along on his missions to help him out. And of course, they both get into trouble. But so issue 40 of Smash Comics was the last appearance of the Ray in Smash Comics. And I believe the Ray only comes back sometime in the Bronze Age. And then I read Star-Spangled Comics, number 12. So the stories that I read there had to do with Newsboy Legion starring Guardian. I originally started reading the Guardian. I was reading about the Guardian appearances, and they originally called Guardian And then Newsboy Legion sort of got in there and sort of took over the headline for the story in later issues. I also read the story about the stories for Star-Spangled Kid, which with his sidekick Stripesy. Essentially, that's is about a kid from a rich family and his driver. Those two guys are the superheroes by night, sort of thing, and mild mannered by day. So it's a rich kid and his driver. They go off on adventures. And then I also read the stories about Robot Man. So Robot Man is about Robert Crane, who's developing a robot and then was killed, and his lab partner ends up putting his brain in the body of the robot. And then so he puts on clothes and a sort of plastic face, and he runs around in his new identity as Paul Dennis, fighting crime. And then in Star Spangled Comics number 13, the other issue I read, Robot Man gets a new body because it was destroyed or rendered unusable, I guess, not really destroyed, rendered unusable in issue 12. Issue number 13, he gets a new body and some upgrades, and he has what's called armor steel, and then he also gets a rocket chute, which essentially enables him to fly around, be able to get around without just a little more fun, a little more exciting. You can leap tall buildings, I guess. So that's what I've read this week. I will read some more and get you up to date with the next episode. Thank you for watching.